Wonderful. I think this is a great time to start. Also, we're aware that there is traffic a little bit, but I really want to thank you on behalf of Jameel Art Center, on behalf of the youth programming, especially the Youth Assembly, a learning team, and this wonderful cohort of youth members for being here with us today. We know a Sunday afternoon can be an effort, but we also guarantee a conversation that speaks not only to the context of this experience, this exhibition, but also to give you an insight on what is it to participate in the world of creativity and in the world of exhibitions and public programming in the context of Dubai and in the context of the UAE. My name is Daniel H. Ray. I am the curator of the Youth Assembly, which is a program designed at the Jameel now in its third iteration that focuses on establishing conversations centered around curatorial practice, critique, community programming, creating new artworks, many of which you have seen now, and also having exactly these conversations. So this panel is called Small, very much in the spirit of the exhibition. And I think we can start in a rather playful way too, which is we're gonna go around perhaps and share our names just so that you get familiar with the folks in the room. And we'll share one small thing about us. We're super, super grateful for your attention. We'll keep it fun. It's been structured that way. I also want to make us aware that this is being recorded to also grant further accessibility to audiences that might be joining us, viewing it in their own time, and also for our archive, because what you're witnessing today is a conversation that is rather the culmination of a year long of learning, of exchange, and hopefully the beginning of deeper and meaningful discussions that need to take place around the topic of the inner child. Okay? So as I said, my name is Daniel, and a small thing about me is, in my next life, I want to become a pastry chef. Over to Farah.
I'm Farah. A small thing about me is the first book. My first favorite book was a school atlas.
Hello, my name is Raheed, and a small fact about me is I collect airplane tickets.
Big mood. Hello, my name is Rashid. One small thing about me is I gravitate towards creating poetic experiences.
Hi, my name is Alexis. I'm an artist and I like to collect found objects.
Hey, I'm Sree. One small thing about me is pink is my favorite color. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Anita. And I doodle, I like to draw on everything. I'm surprised my passport is safe at this point.
Hi, sorry, that was loud. My name is Shama, and one small thing about me is I like walking around the city a lot. After hours, late or really early in the morning.
Hi, my name is Lubnah, and one small thing about me is I love to sleep in moving vehicles.
And those are 9 small things about us. Maybe that's the first question that I have for you as an audience that hopefully you can walk out with today. What is something small about you? In a world of grandeur and in a city with superlatives where things are the biggest, the tallest, and the largest, what is something small that you treasure? That is a conversation that we'll be having today. Because when we first had our session, the 26th of May of 2021, we barely knew each other. But one thing we knew is that we were eager to get to know each other. In the process of discovery and in framing this learning program, this exhibition, and all its different activations, we've realized one thing. That while everyone's story and everyone's childhood is uncertain, at least we know that certainly we've had a childhood. To a degree. So if we use this as a common ground to perhaps start our conversation today, the Youth Assembly engaged in a process of half a year responding and diving very, very deep into the exhibitions of the Jameel. After that, they took over and they started giving direction to the themes and conversations that they saw, as we call in perhaps the world of curation, urgencies. With everything happening in the world, why talk about a child or the inner child in the spring of 2022? Aren't there more important things to talk about? I really appreciate the awkward silence in the room. And it is their urgencies. This is an urgency that they reached, that they arrived at, that they unpacked and will continue unpacking. And one beautiful thing in the articulation of this urgency, of the smallness, if I may, of the inner child is that there is a journey towards the inner child. So that word of journey keeps on coming back. And for those of you who have seen or will see the exhibition, it is framed as a journey. There's portals. There is an original artwork over here by Rashid. There is a commission that Alexis did over here of Mango, who's an artist. You will see lockers activated. You will see every single member of the Youth Assembly presenting commissions and artworks in the ground floor and the second floor. The experience is already a journey, but what have they packed for the journey? What is this journey carrying? So this is the first question that I want to bring to the room. When Raheed, you mentioned you collect airplane tickets. Maybe you can start with you about this. For a journey towards the inner child, for a year of learning and exploration that culminates in this conversation, what have you packed? What have you brought with you?
That's very interesting because usually when you think of packing, you think of the destination. You're packing for a destination, whereas with this experience, it was more like packing for the journey, like you said. So I think for me, it was a lot of wanting to document the small things. So my camera, a little tape in my pencil case, little things, a little tissue there, and picnics with adorable little cheese boards, and just collecting those moments, because I think a big part of or source of comfort for me is finding the beauty in the small things. So I guess documentation devices that would fit into a small little bag. That's what I would pack.
And so, Raheed, you use these tools to articulate your exploration of the inner child. Raheed's work is upstairs in the second floor in Gallery 9. It's a video piece called Shufini, a wordplay in Arabic meaning look at me, but also what is inside me. Very much in conversation with the work of Mahamalluh from the Jameel collection. And one thing that I have found fascinating is that in you inhabiting that room with your work, which again, I really encourage you to see, you're sharing the space in the conversation with Shama. And I'm curious to know, Shama, you're sharing a space already, so there is that connection, but what have you packed? What have you brought with you for this journey? And also, a beautiful distinction right here is Raheed is presenting her own work, whereas Shama has commissioned an artist that goes by the name of Yoni to help, articulate a prompt that you've had. So what has been your process of arriving to this room where you were in conversation with Raheed too?
I think it's tricky for me to narrow it down to one specific thing or a couple specific things I've carried with me. But one thing is for sure that it's not always just about new journeys. It's also just about revisiting past journeys and being more mindful in that process. Like, what did a journey from the past smell like? What did it feel like? What did it look like? Was it cold? Was it warm? How can you kind of, recreate that experience, or what can you kind of read from it? So for the artist that I commissioned, like Danny also mentioned, a recurring theme in the show that you'll see a lot is this idea of portals and like movement through spaces. And then we kind of started thinking about the different kinds of portals that exist. And while, physical movement and like moving vehicles, these are all, ways of moving through portals. For the artists that have commissioned, we looked at journals where this idea of documenting your own sort of experiences and thoughts, how that kind of takes you into like another world of sorts and helps with this sort of clarifying process. So that's what Yoni's work is about. Yeah.
And Shama, you bring up the word revisitation a lot. And it is interesting that revisitation is something that technically as humans we're kind of expected to do, but hardly ever we're either aware of or get the time and privilege to do. Maybe that's a personal opinion. Now, what is interesting about revisiting is I would perhaps switch gears a little bit to the work of Rashid and Anita, who are with us today here. Rashid, we have your work right here, and this is a revisitation of an idea you had as you graduated university in the middle of COVID back in 2020. And then, Anita, you're presenting work upstairs that is also revisiting how one narrates a story of self in relation to nation, in relation to generations of stories being passed. So I would be very interested to perhaps hear from you what the process of revisiting either an artwork, a project, or revisiting a story has looked like. What are discoveries that you've made, and what are precautions that you've had to have in presenting these things?
Go. Okay. So is this okay? Okay, cool. So basically, the concept of my piece comes from the idea in school when I got interested with biology and bacteria and germs, and this is back in 2013. And I started my journey as a biology student and was imposed into biology visuals. In the middle of the journey, I discovered that I'm more interested into the visuals more than the content of biology, and that's where the shift happened. But biological references kept coming into my work and into my expression. What you see here is a scenario, not only with the piece, but with the pieces that go with it in the space. So in the wall, you see the illness. And then in my piece, you see the idea of the perfect facade, the idea of the idealistic image, with bacteria and germs contaminating that image. And the idea behind it is when you encapsulate emotions, when you encapsulate things that you don't speak about, it starts to contaminate you. And that's what I try to magnify here. And it's put in a context where you see the illness, you see the fight with the illness, and then you see a heart which indirectly invites you to Mango's room, which is a way of expectations, which is a sense of freedom. It's inviting you to be calm and be yourself without any limitation. And that's the scenario I wanted to create here.
And could you add a little bit about what was it like for you to revisit and return to this work after 2 years of having first thought about it?
It felt like an unfinished project. I proposed this idea for my senior project, and all the germs you see are before COVID and are not related to COVID. And then we had to do our senior project virtually, and it was unexpected. We graduated, they gave us a graduation, but it felt there's an itch of something unfinished. And this, our Jameel and the Youth Assembly gave me the opportunity to actually bring this idea to life. Thank you.
Thank you, Rashid. Thank you for sharing that with us. And now, again, to establish a bit of a parallel, Anita, you're presenting your work upstairs. So, as I said, it's a full journey for you, for all of us here to experience. Anita, could you tell us a bit about the work that you're presenting upstairs? There's also, these pieces are in the postcards that you have of the front desks that are for you to take home absolutely free of charge as a bit of memorabilia, and it has texts from the assembly for you to meditate on. Anita, what are we encountering in your work?
So if I could go back to an earlier question a bit, you asked, what do we pack for this journey? And I think something so special about the assembly is everyone packed everything or unpacked everything. There was so much generosity in terms of people sharing their own identity and experiences and also listening. And I think through this program, this 1 year of exploration, I had a chance to reflect on so many things that I always considered the cornerstones of my identity, but it was kind of subconscious, or the story of my identity that my parents had told me. And you just kind of take it for granted. And then to have the space to unpack again and again, and especially in relation to current events around the world, I got the experience to sometimes think about it theoretically or intellectualize things, but then I also got to bring it down to the simplest version. And that's usually what we feel. So sometimes you think so much about things that you feel, and I just wanted to take it back to that. I wanted to paint something that was thinking about, so I'm Chechen, and I wanted to kind of talk about that, but there were so many different things to talk about, and I didn't know where to start. And I just thought, how did I navigate this when I was a child? Because I was always told I'm Chechen, and I didn't really know what it meant. People used to ask me, did you make up this country when I was a kid? And I guess I kind of did, because I was just figuring it out as I went along, and I'm making it up again and again in my head. So for me, this painting was just a reflection of this, I guess, identity crisis, and also thinking that, like a lot of people, when they hear that I'm Chechen, I mean, without fail, they usually say, you don't look like other Chechens. And that's such a weird thing to say. And I thought, I do look like other Chechens. I am Chechen. What do you mean? Like, are you telling me that I'm not this because I don't fit your expectation? So for this paint, like I saw this, I was thinking a lot about all this stuff. It was just marinating in my head. And I saw this school photo from American International School in Abu Dhabi when I was like 6 years old. And, you know, this like little happy kid. And like, when I say I'm Chechen, it stresses me out so much. But this kid thought she was Chechen too. She didn't know what it meant. And if anyone saw that, they'd probably say, oh, she doesn't look Chechen either. So I guess it was just a reflection of that. And I thought like this photograph reflected the journey to come, and also that no matter what I think or how I feel about it, I'm always going to be Chechen. Thank you.
Thank you, Anita, for sharing that. Thank you so much. You mentioned that exploration of place and that exploration of, you know, growing up with the conviction of who you are, and perhaps the realization of how the terms maybe have more layers, or how they change. And that reminds me a lot of Sree's work, who's sitting right next to you. So Sree was part of the commissioned artists in the 2020 edition of the Youth Takeover. And now we see Sree, after a year long of learning, but also commissioning artists to continue that conversation. So it is almost like there is this chain being created. And Sree, you've been speaking in the work that we saw in 2020 about place, about sense of belonging to. You've introduced new language to talk about your relationship to place. And now, in this time around, you're also presenting an artist who's talking about place in relation to generations and stories being told. So I'm curious to know, how has it been for you to pass from being a participating artist in a conversation to now being someone taking more of a curatorial hat? And for those of us in the room who perhaps don't know what curatorial means, you know, the curator is that person that works with the trust to navigate conversations and generate relationships that amplify an urgency, a theme. This might be, again, a personal opinion, but perhaps it also groups a bit of what we've been doing, building a relationship of trust to amplify. So as you build that relationship with Vedika, who's an artist that has a locker over there, locker I think 100, and also her work up in Gallery 10, could you tell us what has it been for you from presenting your story in this room to then helping shape someone else's presentation of their story?
Yeah, Vedika is 111, in case anyone wants to check it out.
Correction.
Yeah. I think when I started talking to Vedika, I was obviously signing up to this and being part of this was to also explore that idea of curation and what that might look like for me, and how I enter into that space, or even just the idea of trying that out. With Vedika, I was also particular, like I realized early in our conversation, we were at different positions on how we thought about space and place and being here. Whoa, fire! What are we? Okay.
Little plot twist.
Okay, we're gonna pause. Oh.
It's all good. It's all good.
Plot twist.
Plot twist. The place being challenged.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. We're good to go?
Are we good to go, team? I might go
Okay.
one more time. Okay. We can go ahead.
Excitement.
Yes. Sree, could you tell us, as you continue, perhaps what this distinction was of how you and Vedika were in different positions of how you thought about place?
Yeah, I mean, I was / am in a place of, you know, there's ways we think about belonging that becomes more convenient to talk about, and I'm starting to kind of move away from that, and just basically question maybe a lot of the things I was proposing and the work that we worked together on. It's kind of just like a reflection, maybe partially existential place. Whereas Vedika, was particularly excited when I was starting to talk to her about being like, I want to think about this almost utopian, imaginary bridge existing place where she kind of pulls her inner child from. And that was another thing that was exciting. Like for her, for Vedika, before we even got talking about the kind of curational aspect of this show, like the phrase inner child was kind of what she called her process, right? So taking from that process, she was in a place where she was excited to think of what beginning that conversation looked like, creating a fictional world, and then taking up and creating that fictional world um, from references of various places she thinks of as home and her ancestral belonging. So when I kind of like recognize that the interest for me, both even in our kind of cohort, I had an interest of kind of pushing against what we were thinking about curatorially. Not that I didn't agree with it, just to see what does it feel like to kind of work with a push against, as opposed to just being like I completely agree and I'm vibing with what we're doing. So with Vedika, that was the thing. Like recognizing that difference was about me, because she spoke about beginnings a lot, this kind of creation of a new. And my journey with her was to be about, okay, what does that look like? Because we talk about healing. Do you think healing is a part of thinking about the inner child? A lot of the things we're proposing in our major curatorial text, things that you are interested after all. So it was a lot of kind of pushing back, because I knew that she had a lot of pathways that were already creatively flowing, but I wanted to see what could come out of that, how our show could kind of nudge that to kind of dig deeper.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sree, for sharing those insights into the process. And I really want to rescue you a fun fact that you shared with me when you were presenting the artist that you were thinking about, which was that you found this artist on Instagram. And this reminded me of, multiple curators nowadays perhaps find themselves in those circumstances where the accessibility that Instagram provides or other social platforms put you in conversation with people that we perhaps never thought would be in contact with. But there are so many multiple ways of finding an artist. And I want to be cautious when you say you're discovering an artist. That sometimes tends to feel like, you're the one angel and savior of that artist. But definitely there is a very beautiful exercise of care when it comes to platforming someone. And I really want to perhaps bring to light in this part of the conversation the work of Farah with Khalid Asgarra, who's an artist that we see up in the second floor, as well as the work of Lubnah working with Ibrahim, and perhaps sharing a bit of the experience of how did you get to make a connection with these artists? What did you find? Maybe what did you have in common, and how that interest materialized into a creative experience that is physical, that is immersive, and that lives on nowadays at the Jameel. Maybe we can start with Farah.
So me and Khalid actually have a lot of similarities in the sense that we come from a similar background. We're both mixed Filipino, Arab. We have been raised in the Gulf. And we've already had a lot of conversations before this commissioning process started, and we already knew each other and we're on that process. Reflecting on who we are here, and not just how the space impacts us, but how we impact the space, how we can reclaim the space, and how this is much a part of, the space is a much a part of us as it is a part of, the space. But we kind of navigate those understandings a bit differently, because I do it through writing. He does it more through sound and photography and more visual mediums. So going into curation was something that was truly nerve-wracking for me, because I started out in the assembly not being in the art space before, being more of a researcher, being more in an academic space. So being able to work with Khalid and actually collaborate with him and understand that curation can be much more of a learning experience and a collaborative piece. And something that we both can learn from, rather than me guiding him towards something and creating a piece, was really, really, it just really made me feel a lot of relief, because it just meant that we can produce this work organically based on conversations, based on readings. He would send me things, I would send him things. We would just, go back and forth. And as well, because he is also 19, he's currently at like a very transitional stage of his life, and I'm a very reflective person. So I wanted to like see how we could both explore the inner child by understanding our childhood experiences and where we were brought up and who we are, but now with an adult insight. And having us reflect on that, he wanted to explore that through the urban space, Abu Dhabi, where he grew up, and the neighborhoods that he grew up in. And going back to this point of, I want to leave my mark on these neighborhoods rather than the opposite, because this city is mine. And it's very telling of the title of the piece, which is Abu Dhabi, because it is him. So being able to reclaim that space, changing the names of cities and towers, and Medinat Zayed becomes Medinat Khalid, and just doing it in a very playful way, because we often think that to reflect and to reclaim space, you really need to do it deeply. You need to do it in a way that requires a lot of work, when it is really just as simple as just scratching a name and making it yours. And I am really, I really am happy with the piece, and also seeing him being able to understand his inner child and have it now become a part of him, because the inner child is always somewhat a companion in your lifetime. That's the journey. It's bringing the inner child along with you through the journey, rather than keeping it, on the side, not allowing it to be part of you, because you can really learn so much from that, and that gut feeling, that inner child, that those urges, those desires, that just propels you into so much reflection, so much thought, and it can just start from the really small things. Yeah.
Thank you, Farah. And I really want to rescue from what you articulated and sharing in so much detail and with so much generosity too, the process of working with Khalid. You talked about how space impacts us and how we impact the space. And maybe that's also a helpful transition for Lubnah to share a bit more with us about working with Ibrahim and what Ibrahim's work is doing in the context of smol, and what are the themes that are being presented, what are sounds that we're witness to. So please.
Also, I really resonate with a lot of what you said, Farah. The learning and the collaboration instead of me like guiding this person, which is sometimes what this sounds like. But I met Ibrahim like I think 3 years ago, and we met through a mutual friend in Abu Dhabi. And I would always like sort of notice him just like scribbling, doodling, just kind of sitting in the corner, like your classic artist archetype was Ibrahim. And I was just like intrigued by him. And so I just like talked to him, hang out with him. And once I had the pleasure of like exhibiting my work in Maysan 15, which Danny had curated a year ago. And I hope he doesn't mind sharing. It's so weird to talk about it when they're not here. But anyway, he came to the opening, or like maybe like the next day or something, and he said, Lubnah, like I never knew that people like us could exhibit work like this in these spaces. And I think honestly that really stuck with me. And I would always think about that. And yeah, I hope he doesn't mind sharing this. We would always really talk about like our themes together, our work together, just thinking through things. And similarly, like I'm a writer or like a researcher, and I would just kind of use a lot of concrete, rigid language sometimes, frameworks. Thank you, NYU Abu Dhabi. And Ibrahim was a very different kind of thinker, He used dreams and he used like colors. His visual language is so beautiful. I don't know if you've had a chance to see his works, but they're really lovely. And so we both would have like these very different angles when approaching very, very similar things, which is at the end of the day, home. So again, just very, very, very similar. And recently, Ibrahim actually, he had to move. His whole family moved back to Pakistan, but he went to art school. So he's in the UK. And the question that I posed to him was, how do we examine the politics of our past? Because when we're so young, things can feel so airy-fairy, like, you're just kind of there. Things are happening really deeply, but it takes sometimes distance or maybe walking away to really look back. And sorry, I'm taking up a lot of space, and where am I going with this? I'm going somewhere. But we were looking back at home, looking back at this place. And initially we relied on a lot of like sort of bureaucracy to look back. So we were looking back at our visas or like at the IDs, at the documents. But like the more and more conversations sort of developed and growed, we began to look at our families themselves, just the dynamics that would play out in these families, what it means now that his family is so separated and everywhere. So this poem with his piece, it's many of his family members reading out The Giver by James Baldwin. And it's his family is a very poetic family. And it's just, it's like a thread of connection as he sort of illustrates looking back at home and family dynamics as they unfolded in Abu Dhabi. But yeah, I'll pause there. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Lubna, for sharing that. And I think one of the last words you use now is the word illustrate, and illustration is a medium that keeps on coming back. And I think in the year of conversation and in our monthly sessions with the assembly and our weekly messages too, there has been kind of this exercise of illustrating. Can you illustrate with me, a place in the world that you care about? Can you illustrate with me an art community that you're part of or want to be part of? Can you illustrate with me what home looks like for you? Even the question that we use to frame, not to guide the theme, but to frame the research of this experience was, how can the youth practice society? And, we embrace society as a subject. So it's not be part of society, it's not integrate into society. No, how can we practice society? What happens when society is subject matter? Now, there have been so many exercises of creating society and community, but I really want to highlight one thing that I am actually seeing from across here, which is that room over there, also known at the Jameel as the project space, is creating a very interesting exercise of conversation between different members of society. Funnily enough, or interestingly enough, through the medium of illustration. Alexis, you've worked very, very dedicatedly in working with Mango, who's an artist based in Dubai, in creating a space where there is an ongoing conversation between members of society that we might not have a name to or might not disclose their identity, but who are communicating through illustration in the context of a room, in the context of a table, in the context of the trays where the different illustrations are, to the extent that this very pen is borrowed from there. So what has been the process for you and Mango to create an experience of gathering that also breathes out sometimes, or where there is a conversation through illustration? What stories are being told in there?
So hi. For this space with Mango, we were very interested, or he was very stubborn, I should say stubborn, or insistent, let's say insistent, on making the space not solely focused about just the artworks and his drawings and the illustrations that he has created over the past 2 to 3 years, but it was more so about extending a hand out to the rest of the people, to society, if you will. And the invitation just to draw and to sit, simply because he saw drawing as a means for him to just feel, and there didn't need to be an outcome through whenever he created a drawing or whenever he just sat down and like took some pens and decided to work on a blank sheet of paper, it was very interesting for me to see with Mango how he wanted to approach the idea of having his work out there, because while the focus is, or like the sub themes we have covered were sort of based off of what I had told him my interests were when exploring the theme of the inner child, which was escapism, this need to sort of dissociate and like take your distance and like find your space, which he mirrored a lot of that already. It was already a sort of like we gravitated towards one another simply because I feel like we were already feeling a lot of the same things. As you enter the space, there's a vinyl, for example, on the wall that says, "Calm down." There are a lot of highs and lows, and really, it's just sort of a space for everybody, not even to be like pressured to draw, not even to like have an outcome, a finished product. It is just to be in the space, if you will. Again, not too sure where I'm going with this, but like Lubnah says, we're getting there. But yeah, I would say with Mango, that was really what I love, because the table for him was really the focal point, where he saw people would come together. There was a lot of like conversations about how we wanted to perhaps guide a possible person entering the space, but again, it had to occur naturally or organically also. So just having that prompt offered to people, it's amazing to see how people already want to participate in something. It comes very naturally. And I thought that was really interesting and beautiful and also very sweet. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you. And you're speaking about the different core values that come up in this exercise, right? Of you're engaging with space, you are responsible for it too. So there is an element of care right there. And on top of that, we are caring about a theme, or we're caring about something that is important to us, but we're also caring for individuals, their ideas, the communities that they belong in, plus finding a common ground of a theme to unpack or expand upon. And I'm curious to know, and this is for any of you to perhaps take it, what was that moment of discovering that this is indeed what you needed to talk about? That this is indeed, that you wanted to embrace the inner child here and now? If any of you could perhaps jump in and share, of that discovery moment even.
Okay. I'm like happy to talk about that. I feel a lot of us now, especially with being adults, being 25 and what have you, we feel like or like I'm not alone in saying that it feels like we're living in a very fast-paced world, and a lot of what you see here in this space is just a slowing down of sorts, really just taking the pace and the space and the time to really find and guide your own inner child to like move with you, and for you to both like sort of move together in this world that we live in now.
Yes. So I think what I find really beautiful about how we ended up landing on this theme is it really culminates a lot of what we've actually been feeling throughout the process, where we would discuss all these bigger than life topics like fear and mysticism and dreams. And what we'd find is that we'd really gravitate towards the moments we're having, these moments of reflection, of, care and solidarity, and just the space we're creating for one another to just reflect on these things. And I think that that's something that we just crave naturally, because so much is going on. We just crave this embrace and we kind of wanted to reflect that in what we talked about with this theme, that I think a lot of people are craving that these days, craving this look inwards. And in a way, that journey, recurring words, culminates a lot of what we've been talking about, and it creates that space to just be. You don't have to worry about the outcome or what it's saying or how fancy it sounds, because we just know that it's something we all feel together, whether it's us as the assembly or the audience that's experiencing it. We just feel like it's something that all of us are feeling at the same time. So it's less of a, here, this is something we want you to look into and enjoy, and more like, hi, this is happening, right? We all want to do this. Let's do this together. Let's be small. Let's reflect. Let's play. Let's relax. And I love that about what we've done.
I also just wanted to add, and this goes back to what Anita was saying earlier, this idea of like making up worlds as we go about. I mean, I think for a lot of us, this idea of the inner child links a lot to just world building. And, you know, and we start that very early, like early on, and then we forget somewhere along the way, and then we have a different vocabulary for it where we make, like, you know, speculate about the future and stuff. But it starts when we're so little, where we question why things are the way they are, not in like a way that's like protesting or, you know, arguing, but just in a way that's curious. And I feel like all of our conversations just landed up that way, whether we were talking about dreams or travel or like even like anecdotes from our childhood. It was never forced, and we'd always leave our conversations feeling like we had entered another space of sorts. So I think, yeah, this whole idea of like playfully imagining a new world in a way that just feels very real, and, you know, something that's in not too far out of reach, was something that kind of linked all of these things together, I feel.
Shama, and I want to freeze for a second that image that you bring in of having access to a space, if I may rephrase, because it reminds me of something that Farah has particularly been bringing attention to, which is the idea of having agency in someone else's house. And this is also reflected in the portals over there in the lockers. And this is my last question before I actually open it up to the audience for you to ask anything you want, anything you're curious, maybe formulate a child question, you know, to the assembly. Farah, I'm curious to know, perhaps from your experience, you've mentioned earlier, you know, being more of a researcher perhaps, and then venturing in this world of curation and youth curating and in an institution too. What does it mean in your experience or in your opinion to have agency in someone else's house?
Whoa. Oh, well, thoughts. I think to have agency in someone else's house, that concept just means to be able to actively do something in a space that is apparently foreign to someone's, a place we can't tread on typically, but we do the thing anyway. And it's really also very indicative of the inner child, how they would probably do the thing they're not supposed to do, because that's the one that their gut feeling tells them that you should do anyway, which I think, honestly, gut feelings are always, like, most of the time the right decision. Honestly. If you're questioning something and you just have a hesitancy in doing something, then it's probably not the right decision. That's not, just don't do it. And this idea came about just from actually going into someone else's house, you know, a space that, so we visited Mujgan, who is one of the collections that we have loaned from, and a lot of her works are here, the heart, and over there, and over here, and they're all over the space. And this just came about because we were exploring all these artworks, and as a collector, and like these ideas of like, it's usually something that you don't really are allowed to touch or feel or go into, but here we are in someone else's house just going around. And afterwards she just left us. She's like, just go, like, explore, and once you're ready to talk, we'll, yeah. So like, we could do anything. We could sleep. We could just like sit on the floor and look everywhere. So I really wanted to bring that. I think here into the space, because in an institution, walls and ceilings and floors, like confines in a sense, but being able to manipulate that space. It's truly trying to take over a space, making it softer, making it smaller, making things that actually make people duck, making a pillow fort under the stairs and, covering the ceiling with soft fabric. And yeah, it's really taking over, I guess. To add.
I want to add something. It was really interesting that we went in different groups to the Michigan collection, and she was very generous. She welcomed us to her home, and she invited us to actually explore the artworks without any direction. And it's interesting that most of our dialogues aligned, especially after the sessions where we went and explored the artworks. It's actually the beginning or the spark of smol, of the inner child, because we agreed in most of the artworks speak about the inner child. It etches the idea of the inner child, and that's what links most of the exhibition process to happen.
Thank you, Farah and Rashid, for sharing that. That's really indeed a beautiful moment, and all the labels have all the information you need about that collection. Also, at the Jameel, we'll be dedicating more and more space to tell more about how we connect with collections both in-house and also off-site. Rashid, I might spotlight you in this moment because your t-shirt is saying trust the youth. And maybe that's a segue or a signal or maybe a gut feeling that we should trust you and ask you questions, all of you.
Yes,
So I don't know if this is a good time for the audience to perhaps ask around 3, maybe up to 4 questions, anything that you're burning to know from this specific exhibition, all the way to how youth are actively participating in shaping cultural conversations in the context of Dubai, the UAE, and the Gulf for that matter, and the places that you're also referring to in their work. This is really that time, so I'm really excited to open the floor, to make a mic available as well. Maybe from this side, Shama, it will probably be yours. To perhaps from Jenna has one ready. Perfect, thank you. To perhaps hear from them anything you want to know. There is no limits here for the audience. Yes. If you could please share your name with us and then your question. Thank you.
Okay, I'm Oswaldo. I know some of you guys. And something that I want to ask is one of the things that most impacted me when I arrived here in the UAE, because I come from a place that you belong if you are born there. And this is by the law and also by how I'm Brazilian and how our community sees belonging into a place. So even if you go to Brazil just to be born there, you will be considered Brazilian by law and by the other Brazilians, and this is very natural for us. So when I arrived in the UAE only like a year ago, and as soon as I started making friends here, and most of them are from different places, it's a very cosmopolitan place, I realized that I had many friends that were born here or raised here, but they weren't citizens of UAE. So my question, open to all of you, is how this resonates with the things that we see here today in the exhibition, and more specifically, this conversation that we are having here right now about shaping culture and even politics here, and using the metaphor, if you were able to make UAE and this place your house, or if you still feel like you are walking in someone else's house.
This is a question that comes up really often, and it's always tricky to kind of navigate this. But I just want to, I guess, link this to a very specific part of the takeover, like with the artist that I commissioned, who's no longer, she has a very difficult relationship with the UAE because of personal reasons related to family, but so she's based elsewhere. And like, I think apart from the visuals that you see in the install itself. What was important was this, this remote kind of presence, or this being present in spirit of sorts, where, we had to, where things were in transit, things were shipped out from where she's currently based. But these were all works that are informed by her experiences here. And this whole idea of whether, like, can we consider her a local artist or not? But she's, 25 now, but then most of her life she was here. And this idea of creating like a physical space, and filling the space with her voice as well, to kind of establish her presence here, even though for whatever reason, or for some difficult reason, she can't be here, was something that really stuck with us, and was something that a lot of us can relate to, as the story of a lot of people who have been here and passed through here. But yeah, it's a difficult question to answer, but I just wanted to highlight that one aspect of Yoni's work as well, of distance and establishing presence, not literally, but yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to kind of that energy of like creating space, or the idea of claiming. I think this was both in terms of the commissions and the artwork that ended up showing out, but also the process that we had over the year. Like I remember on the one of the sessions we had this, we're not going to be in the space, we're going to go to the beach just to have a change of, what venue feels like. And kind of our conversation about what we're doing overall was important for me to think about how that idea of claiming space can also, because what you were speaking about, things about the passport, things about nationality, but then our kind of conversation went to the direction of how actions like these are also ways that you start, because there's obviously you could think about censorship and stuff, and is there technically a way that someone could say the show's not going up? Yes, maybe, but the show is up and we're talking, right? So it's interesting how these kind of actions are ways that almost don't necessarily center things that might be kind of larger political schemes, which isn't to say they aren't important. But yeah, I think things like these, the fact that we're here, that this show is up, that we had that overall process, is also a kind of looking at alternative ways where you don't center the government, or you don't center these kind of power structures, but you can still claim it, and no one can say that. They can't be like, hey, you didn't do this process, or you didn't make this work, because you did.
Also, yeah, adding on to what Shama and Sree were also saying, I think an important thing is truly, with exhibitions and shows like this, and to even have opportunities that allow different people from different spaces, from different experiences and identities, to even come and have a conversation about what they're experiencing. That alone starts a chain reaction in the sociocultural that allows people to come and say, oh, I can actually now tell my story as well. And that was one of the things that Khalid told me right at the start of his commission. And when I asked him, what is success for you? What do you consider success with your piece? And he's just like, if someone can look at this and say, that is me, and now I can also do this, like how it has already been done, then I've done my part. And that truly, to start conversations, to not just start them, but also start, because conversations, we always have them, but to have them in spaces that allow public and to allow everyone else to start engaging with it, and to also reclaim that space too. I think that's truly the goal, or not the goal, one of the after outcomes of things like this. Yeah.
Thank you, Shama, Sree, and Farah. Super grateful for how you articulated, also from a personal standpoint, these answers. I'm very curious to know. I'm very happy to welcome maybe one question from the audience, and then if we have an extra space, we might fit in a third one. I see a few excited faces, so this is your time for next question. Yes, over here. Thank you, Jenna. If you could also share with us your name and your question for our speakers today from the assembly.
Hi everyone, my name is Shazia, and I've been actually racking my head on how to articulate this question, so I'm going to give it a go. The undercurrent of understanding, to me, and this is debatable, a youth assembly or the idea of handing over a conversation to the youth, to me is in the same lines of the youth is our saviors in a sense, right? Or the responsibility. You see that also in conversations that you have in like about climate change or capitalism or whatever. Hand it over to the youth with Greta Thunberg, and I was just thinking about the responsibility that's maybe unwillingly given to the youth. And did you have that? What do you think about? And so often being called a youth erases the sort of intersections of your own identity. Like you're all supposed to be having the same sort of, I guess, thoughts or the same gaze towards whatever it is, right? Or towards your inner childhood. So I was wondering about, were there conversations about, or did you have that feeling of responsibility, or did you have a sense of feeling like you had to be the voice of a certain generation of artists or curators or researchers in this region?
Thank you, Shazia, for the question. Any takers over here? Lubnah?
I love this question so much. And I don't think we've ever, did we have a conversation about this? No. But like, I think because it's kind of a given, like, I think when we were signing up, it said youth takeover. And like it just kind of goes into your subconscious. You're like, yeah, okay, youth takeover. But it's really funny because I also noticed I started leaving out the youth whenever I'm sending emails or like if I'm writing an Instagram caption. I never say youth, I just say takeover. And I feel like we're all positioned differently about, or like, that's also the thing that this word does, that I think sometimes, at least how I perceive it, reduces that into like a monolithic way of thinking about the youth too. And I don't know how I feel about that. And I know we all probably have very differing opinions on this, so I'm only speaking for myself. But in terms of the responsibility, and I think what I thought, the word that I was thinking of was like the emotional labor that I think we often are constantly given. And also how it quickly gets divided into this binary of like young and old. And what is this? I don't know. I'm also trying to move away from this binaristic thinking. But yeah, so these are just the ways that I'm thinking about the term. And I think my solution has been, I'm just gonna not use it, even though it's everywhere. But I'd also love to hear from Danny, because I know you've spoken a lot about this idea of youth curating youth. So what that means to you on the other end of the spectrum.
Thank you, Lubna. And I think the acknowledgement that we all have different stances about this specific word and its context matters a lot. I think for me, it's funny. It is you guys' work, and this is my time to thank you for it, that you've also put me, and I think the entire group of people next to me, from an educational level to question what it means to continue to convey that message. My introduction to the Jameel was as a member of the previous cohort, being nominated and invited to participate. And I remember back then articulating that for me, it was interesting to explore the idea of triple youth, a young artist in a young art community in a young country. Like I figured that very few places in the world had, that almost pristine alignment of young and young and young. And then the whole idea of youth curating youth came out of a burning desire to perhaps break precisely with a few binaries and hierarchies of the art world, where you have to be old enough to be exhibited or old enough to be exhibiting, right? So it's funny, the youth curating youth idea is actually a response to that binary, but now it maybe installed a new binary of, to the extent of someone who's in her early 40s telling me the other day, why am I not eligible for the youth assembly? Why do you cap it at 24? And then the friend said, well, in Korea, I'm a year older. Like, I'm 25 already there. Can I be part? And I said, maybe, and And it is a difficult question. Who are we as an institution and as creative professionals to define what a cohort or what a generation is? But I think, and you're prompting us to revisit how we communicate year 4 of this. So I'm telling you that you planted that seed. I think, and also to circle back a bit to Shazia, yes, we tend to make the mistake of thinking that youth overrides and overpowers the layers and dimensions that people come with. Youth shouldn't be a grouping. It might be a departure point, right? We did sign up for this technically, right? We're under 25. We're what the world calls young. But I think and again, I don't have the answer just yet to your question, Lubna. But what I can say though is I hope that this exercise translates into when I'm 30 something and 40 something, or when I move to Mars in 2070, that if I ever hesitate what brought me to the world of creativity, I can be loyal to the 20-year-old who arrived at the Jameel. That's the exercise of being young right here. It is that even if this is a contested term that we are, alhamdulillah, we're destabilizing youth, maybe that's what we've been doing for a year, at least it gives us an element of return and loyalty that if that person with such a lack of experience trusted that they could propose, maybe in the moments of further pressure and further hesitation, we can be loyal to that instinct. This might be a note to leave us with, unless there is any burning things to articulate.
I actually want to add something related to the youth. It's such an honor to have the platform to share ideas, to open up and speak. For me personally, it was important to bring out the inner child wounds, to bring out the things that we don't talk about. It's sort of encouraging the elder generation, the younger generation, to actually speak up about their emotions, their feelings. No matter what they're feeling, it's valid and you can express. And it's also inviting people to go back and see that inner child wound, hug it, communicate with it, instead of just burying it and think it's not just gonna have an influence. It's such an honor to be able to communicate this idea through the exhibition and through the assembly as well.
Thank you, Rashid, so much. And thank you thanks to you guys, to each of you, and I'll go by name. Thanks to Farah, to Raheed, to Rashid, to Alexis, to Sree, to Anita, to Shama, and to Lubna for delineating this as a space where not only we could have multiple conversations, where we could make of care an active and ongoing exercise that indeed enables that level of healing, of recovery, and hopefully of generosity, so that perhaps after this conversation, you walk out of this room or stay for the theater play following with a new perspective on how we connect to who we are now and who we were before. Thank you so much for today. Thank you. Again, super grateful for your presence here. At 8 p.m. on the dot, we'll be having a staging of Every Brilliant Thing, starring Gautam Goenka via The Junction, a program that has been coordinated by Farah with the absolute endorsement and support of the entire cohort. So please stick around if you can. The theater play is absolutely free of charge, and we're very excited and grateful. And we'll stick around for you to approach us, to take pictures, to laugh a little bit, and to decompress, which is the most fun part, okay? Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.